This is the Seven Sisters. You may have heard of the White Cliffs of Dover. We are on the same coastline. So chalky cliffs stretch very much along most of the south coast, and so most of our houses are built on it here, which makes our gardens quite interesting. The Seven Sisters County Park, short bus ride east of Brighton, is 280 hectares of chalk cliffs, meandering river valley and open chalk grassland. The Seven Sisters, and I needed my notes for this because I learnt this at the weekend, are denoted by 7 crests separated by dips, or what are called swells, from the necks and the remnants of dry valleys. It's a victim to severe erosion, and we often have the path closed. And you can see here a huge chunk that fell out quite recently. So there's now 8 sisters. And the hills that we have, the 8 sisters, not 7, are Havenbrow, Saltbrow, Roughbrow, Brass Point, Flagstaff Point, Flat Hill, Bailey's Hill, and Went Hill Brow. The dips are called bottoms, so then you have Haven Bottom, Short Bottom, and you'll get used to it in English. Lots of things are called weird names like Bottom something or something Bottom. So a short introduction to the quaint and weird names of things in Sussex, but it's a really beautiful area, and it's not going to be here for much longer as well. So if you do have a chance to go on the short bus ride, I really recommend it. I just wanted to show you the Mentimeter from today. Well done. There's so much, it's really cool. Lots of things about what you're most looking forward to about the EXPO. It was great to see this. The key ones in the middle there that were the ones that people have said, lots of people have said the same thing: inspiration, learning, networking, meeting people, new ideas, innovation. After the keynote, we'll have drink and food in the marquee, so I hope you get to do more networking and meeting people, and then the learning and innovation will hopefully come in the next few days as well. The map, because I realise it's quite small, and so there's just lots of people across Europe now. Burning questions that you've asked, and I'm not going to give answers to these, but I think these are questions for all of us to be thinking about through the EXPO. How do we stay connected afterwards? I think Anne Lammers earlier offered some solutions to that. How can we work together to gain more visibility in the digital space, which seems to be dominated by extremist forces at the moment? How can we extend the impact of our collective projects through collaboration? What other ways can we bring together disparate disciplines and sectors to work together on digital Holocaust memory? How do we reach a broader audience outside of academic contexts? How can we share resources, funding, big one we'd all like to share, networks and subject matter expertise? How does the current international political climate affect Holocaust education and memory, and how do we address this? How can tech help speak to a younger generation without losing the human question? And that's it. So, questions to think about, and these might be questions you address in your sessions, in the Q&A, and the discussions, but also in our informal spaces as well. So, I'm now going to introduce Dr. Eva van Zelter. She is an associate professor and deputy chair of the Department of Contemporary History, chair of the Digital Humanities Research Center, and chair of the Faculty Council of the Faculty of Philosophy and History, all at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. Her research and teaching focuses on European and regional contemporary history, Holocaust, cultures of remembrance, and politics of history, migration history, digital humanities. Eva's written a fantastic book about the history of Holocaust memory, mostly on the web. It's in German, so that a lot of you here will be able to read it, and a lot of you won't. So it's really, really wonderful to have her share some of this research in English as well. I'm going to pass on to Eva. She's going to speak for about an hour, and then we'll open up to questions. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Vicky, for this really nice introduction. I have to get rid of this here. Distinguished colleagues, dear friends, dear historians that I see you sitting here in the audience, it's a really great pleasure, the great honor to be allowed to speak to you today. A big thanks, I think, goes to the organizers, especially to the team around Wiki. I think this is a wonderful event. EXPO is the right thing to talk about here. And I may say, if you allow me to use the word, I really feel very comfortable in this nerdy community that we are. So I was asked to talk about the history of digital Holocaust studies, as I will call them, which sounds like, yeah, that's something that could not be that old, but I have actually done some research on this for quite some time now, and the history of digital Holocaust studies actually goes back to the very beginning of the internet, if we want to say so. I was reading through the program and I saw that you would have drinks and snacks, and so I gave up all ideas of interactivity, but I don't see this drinks and snacks happening, so I'm very sorry. This is just going to be a boring talk, and we will have the interactivity at the end with questions and answers and drinks and snacks afterwards. So bear with me for now. Yeah, as Vicky said, I did some research in this area. My book came out in 2019. My book was finished in 2019. It came out only in 2023 for some reasons which, if I look in this audience, would no longer persist today. So my university was not able to find reviewers who felt comfortable to actually do reviews on this intersection between history and the digital at that point. So it took almost 2 years to find enough reviewers to pass my book in this inspection. Now it's online, and before you ask the question, yes, at some point it should be translated, or at least parts of it should be translated if I ever have the time to do so. But to my talk. We gather, I think, at a critical moment, a time when the very nature of memory is being transformed as we speak. I think we are all aware of that we are living in a time when memory undergoes very big radical transformation. For decades, the Holocaust has been this sacred, this unique, almost sacred memory space, part of our collective memories. It was deeply embedded in established institutions, in memorials, in museums, and so on. And it was communicated through traditional media with more or less careful curation. This is the age of remembrance that Pierre Nora coined in 1991, or also we could talk about the age of the memory boom as a term that was noted by Jay Winter in 2001. This period saw an exponential increase in the interest of different categories of Holocaust history and memory on a global scale. The digital realm, I think, has deeply disrupted this landscape, this safe landscape, over the past, now we can say almost 30 years. On the one hand, the internet and online media, of course, always to think about this, evolved into, I would say, indispensable instruments for public history, for engagement with Holocaust memory. On the other hand, the shift has also brought about a huge wave of other forms of memories. They could be positive, they could be negative, but most of these new memories are uncontrolled, they are unauthored by our traditional institutional control mechanisms. I think in this period, a lot of the lines that we had drawn in dealing with the Holocaust have blurred considerably, some have even crumbled. The boundaries that I'm talking about is this big wall that existed between public and private memorialization, but also between collective and individual memory. And I also think right now we are in the middle of something between fact and fiction. In other words, stability is replaced by a very fluid and dynamic memory, and this is what we all deal with when we do digital Holocaust studies. So I traced these, or I tried to trace these shifts in my book. Oh, actually I went too far, where I actually tried to find answers to the core questions. How does digital technology, or how did digital technology transform Holocaust remembrance? So basically, I've focused on the relationship between Holocaust history, remembrance, and digital media between 1995 and 2020. My hypothesis, to give out the secret right away, basically my central argument here is that digitization democratized Holocaust memory, but also it endangered our notions of historical integrity and ethically appropriate representation. So the internet and digital media allows a lot of broader participation, but this comes at a cost. And it comes with many new risks that I don't want to go into details here. Memory institutions, or many of our institutions, have tried to deal with this and have dealt with these challenges that we face, but they also face many limitations that are due to the mechanisms of digital logics. I'm aware, and I'm sure you are all aware, that all of these challenges reflect broader societal shifts, and I think it's in our community to break this basically down to our topics. What is unfortunately also true over this time period that I try to trace digital Holocaust studies or digital Holocaust memory and history, racism and anti-Semitism are no longer at the fringes of our societies, especially in the Western world. They have moved to the center. And I think digital tools were very strong handles to support this movement towards the center. I think this is something that we could talk about later. So today I will trace the Holocaust memory and digital Holocaust memory and history across 4 distinct phases. Of course, they are not as distinct as I described them here, but that's basically also how my book is constructed. I've tried to find commonalities and things that, where the things coincide. I start with what I call phone book era before 2000, moved into the age of the memory machines between 2000 and 2007, and the period past 2007 that I called the age of hyperconnectivity. Maybe that was not true then, now I'm sure it's definitely true. And since 2020, a period that's not covered by my book, so I could just add this in afterwards, so to say. I would say we are in a solidified globital memory space. Also this term coined by a colleague, Anna Garde-Hansen. No, Anna Redding, sorry, wrong Anna. Let's jump into the first phase. So I'm not going to read through all of this, don't worry, but I would say the pre-digital and the early digital era saw Holocaust remembrance institutionalized through many things. Memorials had a big surge. There were big trials against Holocaust denial. We see a lot of survivor testimonies that are being collected, centralized, digitized, and so on. And of course, we see this rise in the foundational institutions with this huge musealization trend during the 90s. What we also see is the formalization of remembrance with many memorial days, and you all know this peaks in 2005 with the institution of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day on January 27th in November 2005. This period coincides with the birth and rise of the World Wide Web as we know it in a browser surrounding. And this is also the time when the Holocaust history and memory moves to the digital world and the first archiving efforts emerge. Just to put there a couple of numbers, by 1995 we have 1.5 million network computers with 30 million users globally, so this is already a new audience, and also for Holocaust history and memory this becomes an attractive space, how to reach out beyond national avenues. To make a long story short, early internet sites were largely text-based. Multimedia was not really an issue there yet. We had some images, we had some blinking backgrounds for those of you who are old enough to remember. But we basically have informational portals on the website that we see. So basically also here it's a very nascent phase of digital engagement. Am I at the right side? Yeah. What is interesting, I think, we have a very initial phase where we see a lot of private or from smaller organization website initiatives that come up here. And all of these, or most of these initiatives focus on the factual preservation of Holocaust history and on countering Holocaust denial. So standing here now, we would actually think, so what is new? NITSCR, I'm sure some of you know the project, was founded in 1991. It emerged with the urge of counter Holocaust denial on the then very virulent discussion forum space where Holocaust denial was especially pushed, and especially pushed very early into the digital space. NITSCR created large archives where especially denial myths were collected. Of course, on the downside, it also had a large collection of denial websites, links to denial websites and discussion boards. So it became this entry portal for revisionists when they tried to find the counter-narratives on the downside. Almost the same thing happened with the Holocaust History Project. It responded to denial, and it had this huge collection back then, and it grew actually until 2016, sorry. This huge collection of digitized primary sources. Again, a private initiative to educate people. Other projects, I'm clicking on the wrong side here. Other projects, maybe some of you remember, was remember.org, which became known as the Cyber Rift, the Holocaust. It launched with the goal of creating an interactive multimedia CD-ROM, a technology that we all now has vanished. It never came into existence. It disappeared. It never became a CD-ROM, but it became an online archives, a repository of survivor narratives, and also it started doing some experimental art projects, like the one here with Abe's story on the right-hand side. Even it went online with a virtual tour of Auschwitz-Birkenau in 2004. Also this here, like a very nice private initiative. In the German-speaking world, we have Shoah.de, founded in 1996, went online in 2000, and Lernen aus der Geschichte online in 2001, so learning from history. Also here, these initiatives, starting from individuals, became organizations or smaller groups that had a very strong educational background. And they provided historical material, educational resources, also some photo material, and so on and so forth. These initiatives or these projects show a clear focus on education and on counter-narratives to Holocaust denial. Interesting enough, these private initiatives had more understanding of the potential of the internet than many of the, especially German institutions, had at the time. So let's say that the digital realm was more or less, until the end of the 2000s, really in the hands of private individuals and smaller organizations. This has many reasons. One of the reasons certainly was that institutions are slower to adapt because of administrative hurdles, and it's also because I think the bandwidth was really not great enough for institutions to make the internet an interesting place to be present. What I think really is interesting at this point, we encounter one of the milestones, as I called them here, that happened in technological choices. If we were in the technical world, we would call them killer applications, although it's not an application, it's a choice in my mind. So this was to determine the future of Holocaust online discourse. European institutions continue their avenues into getting the most out of HTML and XML adaptations, and US institutions very quickly, or at this point, shifted to database infrastructures. And I think this was a very important shift, a very important choice that was made back then, because ever since then, I think especially our resources as researchers have been gathered in all these huge databases that begin their way into the digital world at that time. So basically, the database became the technology of Holocaust digital archiving. So a couple of examples. As you can see here, one of the HTML steps into the digital world on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you can see the very early Holocaust encyclopedia of the USHMN, solutions on how to present this database in a format so that it would be also accessible to a broader public. European institutions were quick to adapt this, and by now we see, and by the beginning of 2000, we see a lot of European countries also, or institutions of memory also, jumping into this database idea, like on the left-hand side, the Findbuch for the victims of the Findbuch für die Opfer des Nationalsozialismus, the Feindbuch for the victims of National Socialism in Austria. But also the digital collection started to grow very quickly ever since 2003, 2004. We have one of the largest collections at Yad Vashem that actually was put online in 2004 with the Righteous Among the Nations database. These projects and many others are, as you all know, continue to be cornerstones of Holocaust research, and also of showing what is happening in this area until today. We saw also in this phase very early multimedia attempts by some institutions, such as the USHMN, that actually made some online exhibits. The Nazi Olympics in 1936 is one of those examples. It was done in 1997. So yeah, it tried to put traditional exhibitions to an online space. And another one which I found very interesting was the Jewish Museum in Berlin, which tried to experiment not only with bringing analog exhibitions to the digital world, but creating new online exhibitions. Of course, largely within the framework of what bandwidth and the internet allowed you to do at that point. All of these efforts, up until then, can mostly be described as static, with very little interaction. So it was not, these websites or these projects were not driven by to interact with the community. We are still in the area where we have this one-to-many idea of media studies. So you have one sender and many recipients. So basically how TV and radio functions. And this phase, I think we stay with this stable one-to-many broadcasting idea. What was the key tension, or what are the key tensions in this phase? I think, to put a long story short, I would say we see a lot of digital optimism, if you want to call that, about democratization, but we see very many early signs of destabilization. So the early promise that the internet would democratize everything, would democratize access to knowledge, would democratize also voices in the world, also made its inroad into Holocaust memory, and it also had this promise that this internet, this digital media, is going to break down institutional barriers. However, also the hidden tensions became visible also in this very early phase. This openness simultaneously provided access to truth and falsehood on the same level. So it was up to the consumers basically to choose what they thought for correct or not correct. Like the NITSCOR project that I talked about before, on the one hand, they tried to counter hate with a lot of documentation, but on the other, by offering this really extensive link lists to the revisionist sites, became an entry door for revisionists into this world. We see also early warning signs. There is already trolling going on, and there's a lot of permanent self-administration, if we want to call it like that. And I think this also foreshadowed whatever we see that it's happening later. And what we also see, this is complex. So just moving from analog to digital doesn't work. So we have to find new ways of dealing with Holocaust history and memory. And this also, yeah, you could see that this is already being a problem up until the 2000s. Let's move to the second phase. I think this is the phase when we can talk about the internet is turning into a mainstream media, and digital remembrance becomes important. Just a couple of numbers again. The internet boom, of course, after the 2000 is real. We said 30 million users by 1995. By 2000, we had 360 million users. And just one more number, by 2019, we had 4.3 billion users. So this transformed the internet very quickly into an omnipresent medium that was really quickly moved out from being a niche in academic circles to being an everyday commodity. We have some global remembrance efforts. Stockholm Declaration in 2000 standardized Holocaust remembrance, and we have the UN International Holocaust Remembrance Day initiated in 2005, which basically is a global commitment to celebrate this day. At the same time, we see a lot of regional and global national networks that emerge alongside the international efforts to connect and network on a transnational level. I just put one here, the Gedenkstätten Forum in Germany, for example, which was born in 1999 and moved very quickly to the online world. We see a lot of international networks, and we see one transition that I think is rather important. We see a shift from the static digital information platforms to the more interactive online spaces. We see some innovation now everywhere. A lot of this is still available today or still important today. So georeferencing becomes an issue during this phase. I don't need to go into detail here. We've had some examples today. And multimedia content is now definitely moving to the fore, moving beyond text, basically. So we really see this visual aspect jumping right into Holocaust memory and history. So we have at this point what we see is that institutions like Yad Vashem and the USHMM develop a very significant online presence. In my opinion, thus they expand their roles as shrines of memory. This term that was coined by Amos Goldberg in 2012. They really expand this into the digital world. The US HMM's Holocaust Encyclopedia evolved into one of the cornerstones of Holocaust online information, and it expanded its reach also by translating the encyclopedia from 2 languages in 2004 to 19 languages by 2018. It also enriched this encyclopedia with this extensive background that it had in archives of photos, documents, and oral histories. Before I explain the Wayback Machine a little more, similarly we see this traction of institutional digital traffic for Yad Vashem. It really puts a lot of digital collections online now. And this also showcases the commitment to digital preservation and also to this reach outside of the academic community, because these collections, they try to make these collections accessible to everyone, especially for educational purposes and for research. So the aim of these efforts largely was preservation, education, and again, countering Holocaust denial, as well as expanding, like I said, as well as getting a global reach. And now I get to this. The leadership of USHMM and Yad Vashem in the online world is quite clearly put down in the Internet Archive. This was one of my main sources when writing my book. If we compare online traffic in the Wayback Machine, because other shrines of memory, like I have the Anne Frank House on the left, Auschwitz-Birkenau in the middle, and the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe on the right-hand side, is basically very much smaller than the ones of Yad Vashem and USHMN, or non-existent at all. So let me just quickly go back again. Here we have Yad Vashem, and here we have the USHMM. If you ask why do they start in the middle of 2004, that's when they actually put their new website online. So you can see this created a lot of engagement, and we can see this really down in the Wayback Machine. I think the other thing that we also can see here, that the Americanization, a term that we have all been following for quite some time, the Americanization of Holocaust memory now extends into the online world. It is something like a continued Americanization influenced by institutions like the USHMM, but also the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the Museum of Tolerance, and so on, by Moriah Films, all these institutions that work together. And they now create a really extensive online presence with almost global dominance. This has to do with the well-funded organizations that we see in the US, but also with advanced website technologies that are being put online now. They are going to set the standard for quite some time after this phase as well. To explain my analysis here, I did, for the period of, while I was writing the book, I did a network analysis for 3 years, more or less, and I just picked this one from 2019 because I think it very clearly shows still the dominance of US institutions, but what is also quite interesting, I thought, that we have two different networks if we talk about US institutions. On the right-hand side, you see basically the bluish, pinkish network that is mainly the Museum of Tolerance, Moriah Films, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, their Facebook initiatives, their other initiatives, and so on. And the other circle on the left-hand side is mostly the USHMM collaborating very closely with Yad Vashem. And what I found interesting in here when I saw this was, oh, these are really distinguished networks, although they are in the same country and they have very little connection between them, but they're both very influential circles. The ones down here in the center that you see here, maybe just this one, can you see? Yeah. These one here are mainly German, other European institutions, and they actually have quite good connections with each other. But this American dominance, I think, can quite clearly still be seen. Of course, this is just a glimpse of the moment, but I think if we would dig into the Wayback Machine more with these websites of these archives, I think this would be maybe even be stronger if we went, a decade back. American predominance or dominance could also be seen in the leadership or in their role in the new international networks that were now created, like the Task Force for International Cooperation on Holocaust Education, Remembrance, and Research. ITF, yes, and there was a reason why it was changed. This name was not very easy to deal with. It was later called, or is now called, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. But their influence in this really, of course, amplified the influence of American institutions. Although this could also be misleading, I have to be critical here, because for quite some time, the USHMM simply hosted the website of the task force. So maybe this is a bias that I should put more emphasis on when I look into these initiatives. What happened to the private world? It still was quite virulent, quite existent. It brought about a diversification of the narratives. We see multiplication of private initiatives and with many different diverse perspectives and a lot of grassroots engagement. So the area where we find the private world or the smaller organizational world is the blogosphere, but also forums are very important there, and some private websites. They are, so to say, the key spaces for privates, for individuals outside institutional focus. In the 2000 until 2007, we see some quite influential debates, especially the one from Hart and versus Holocaust controversies was the other blogosphere. They came central for exchange, but at some point they were lost in trench wars, fighting against each other in scandals and denial accusations against each other, but also from attacks from outside. So this is the more visible space, so to say, for private initiatives. The other thing is that the very many individuals started engaging with the memory of the Holocaust, either in their families or for whatever reason, because they came across the topic, the issue. And we see many blogs that come up now with a very individual, private, personal engagement with Holocaust history and memory. And we see, of course, also some early social media adaptation. It's still too early to talk about this this is not yet an influential space. So what is the result? We see a much more fragmented, less authoritative narrative, and we see a lot of blurring of lines here, again, especially between expert curated and individual interpretations. These interpretations, I think, all become visible when we look at what I would call the milestone of this phase, at the evolution of Wikipedia as a multi-authored weblog that now quickly turned into the new book of knowledge, as we know. For those of you who know me, I really do like to dig into Wikipedia because it's such an interesting discursive space, although sometimes you could go through the walls just reading through the discussion pages. Anyway, I'm not alone in working with Wikipedia or in trying to analyze Wikipedia. In 2013, a team of researchers analyzed the most debated Wikipedia pages in 10 different language sites, and they came to the conclusion that the Holocaust was one of the most contested articles in all of the languages, next to Israel, Adolf Hitler, and God. So this is a space where we can still dig into quite deeply. So what are the key tensions of this phase? While I was talking about, let's say, the positive developments, or more or less positive developments so far, it is also true that this period saw the proliferation of Holocaust denial and revisionist websites. They exploited the open nature of the internet to spread misinformation, to spread whatever alternative facts they found. And there was not really any regulatory oversight. Both institutional as private projects of this time responded or tried to respond to this, but we could also see the limits of countering falsehoods because just new ideas and new histories just popped up at that point. What we see here, that memory becomes a network commodity, so the internet architecture made memory much more fluid than it was before. We see a lot of private influence, so individuals and non-institutional actors could quite easily also get significant global traction at this point already. For institutions, the challenge is big. I think institutions had to deal with the challenge of trying to centralize control of our Holocaust history and memory in a very decentralized environment. And I think this is a really transitional phase where we see a lot of things basically breaking apart. We see also shifts in audience reception. Visual dominance becomes now quite prominent. Images, multimedia shape this phase very clearly. We see new forms of memory, new concepts of memory that come up. Especially, I would see the two concepts of prosthetic memory from Alison Landsberg and post-memory from Marianne Hirsch. I see the digital platforms of that time that really are the prime environments for both. We have ongoing concerns, again, about, despite this great access that the world has to the internet, we see concerns of trivialization, superficial engagement in a very complex history. And with that, we already move to part 3, to phase 3, which I termed the connective turn. In this phase, we see really a profound shift, I think. The Web 2.0 really had an explosion in that period. We see the rise of platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, as it was called before it was called X, and later on Instagram. And that really transformed digital communication to our active participation. And it actually moved this phase from multimedia to multimodality, I think. The prosumer phenomenon is what we're talking about here. So basically, users become consumers and producers at the same time. We have a very technological shift. I would also say this transformed remembrance from a mental faculty. I know this is provocative, but I think this is really true, from a mental faculty to a technical competence. So the ones who were really visible, who were able to find, store, share, comment in the digital devices, and not the ones who were really able to remember a lot of things. We see a lot of new memory concepts that come up in a theoretical area at this point. Digital memory by Joan Gardner-Hansen, many concepts that have driven us ever since by Andrew Hoskins. New memory, digital network memory, connective memory, or I think the one that still persists today is the concept of global memory from Anna Redding and others. Also, what is true, we see a huge volume of data and instant searchability, and that is now dictating what is remembered and what is told and what is retold. This actually leads to a curatorial overload. I don't know if this is the right expression, but I think this goes to the expense of the lack of information that was maybe prevalent in other decades. Yeah, Holocaust memory becomes participatory, as we can see, transnationally, and especially becomes emotionally driven. So we have all kinds of hybrid memory forms that come up. Sometimes they are praised as projects as history from below that is being made at the moment. And we see some institutional adaptations of social media, especially the big ones, again, they now really connect to the world, as you can see, especially on Yad Vashem on the left-hand side, launched its new website in 2009 with the social network role. And no, don't look for it now; you won't find it. It's somewhere hidden in the lower part. And also, the ḣAttened expanded its presence on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. At the same time, maybe something that only I see like this. We see a lot of tensions arise from very influential private projects or individual projects that illustrate the tensions that come up at this point, and I see them as milestones because I think they really were very influential also on how to break the barriers in using social media and how to use social media for remembrance purposes. The one that I really like is the dancing Auschwitz phenomenon, where Auschwitz survivor Adelek Cohn and his nieces and nephews dance in front of European concentration camps to Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive" dance, which caused a lot of discussion and reactions from the international community. The most interesting one, I think, is that the music company owning the rights to the song actually denied them or made them take the song down from YouTube because they were not allowed to use it or had to pay high amounts of money. Of course, the video comes up over and over again. So somebody seems to have an eye on this, so that it's not just a silenced version by actually the daughter of Adelek Cohn is online, but that also the music coming with the version keeps popping up over and over again. The second project that I think that was really influential was the Facebook page of Henios Sztomierski in 2010, a Polish kid that was killed in a concentration camp. Also, this had a huge outcry on how could you create a user profile for somebody who had died. Both projects met with praise on the one hand as the celebration of life, but also they were also condemned as tasteless. But I repeat, I think these projects provoked a critical engagement with what is happening out there in the social media world and how can we embrace that more proactively for new forms of remembrance. And I think the reason for that is that they really, first of all, they showed this emotional engagement of users with the history and memory of the Holocaust. Yeah, I think that was what I wanted to say here. We have also new global players. We see in this phase the rise of, or the birth of ERI, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure. It was launched in 2010, but only, I think, became more prominent in the past couple of years. And we see also, finally, so to say, long awaited, the vast collections of the artisan archives made their inroads into the digital world. They went online 2019 and enriched, I think, biographical research at a very large scale. What we also see, but especially what we see in this phase, is we have new storytelling formats. And I think the three big topics here would be micro-narratives, hashtags, and memes that we should mention. So especially this quick and massive rise of often simplified, fragmented storytelling formats were really a problem for Holocaust history and remembrance. But also, I think what became very important to create these new formats was the hashtag in itself, to basically really aggregate content and shaping online discourses, allowing many users to aggregate or bring together to connect otherwise disparate pieces of information and participate in a collective community somehow. What, however, really is driving our community very much, and I'm saying is because it keeps resurfacing every 2 years, is this phenomenon of selfies at serious places, the self-portrayal on smartphone cameras, in concentration camps, in memorials. This becomes a highly discussed topic. Ever since 2011, we have new waves of discussions about this, peaking, I think, in the controversial installation Holocaust by German-Israeli artist Shakak Shapira. And no, this is not from my private archives. As you all know, the artist deleted the website, but of course, as I said, the internet not really does forget. Someone is always putting these things back up. I think the concerns remain the same. Selfies were often perceived as thoughtless, of course, as trivialization, as inappropriate, and this is still the same until today. So I think what I also this is also one of my, not hobbies, but this also was, I like tracing the selfies discussion because I think it also shows very clearly one thing, that the internet, while it doesn't forget anything, it also doesn't remember. So we have these projects coming up every second year. Again, there's this big outcry, oh, we have selfies, and everything starts from anew. So I've been tracing this since 2011, and I think this is really a great example to show how big the amount of information is we have on the net. And although it never gets forgotten, it is really hard to bring these ideas back up again. We also see now, of course, a very creative adaptation of new formats, always aimed at a young audience, whatever that means. That also some of these projects acquire millions of subscribers or likes and hashtags and followers. But also, again, even these projects lead to massive discussions about appropriate representation, about commercial interests in the ones who actually do the projects, and so on and so forth. I think we are all aware of the project I put here, Eva's Stories, which launched in 2019. What is also an interesting space, of course, is the memosphere, or the memes. This is inherent, in my opinion, is an inherent part of the evolution of digital cultural communication in this phase. Of course, here ideas are even more simplified than we have known so far, whether for negative or positive purposes. Yeah, and I just bring one example here from my book that I found really interesting, this memosphere of the Mufti made me do it from 2015. That really went viral with many examples that I could bring here. I think what is important for this phase is that the visual turn of the digital world became massively apparent now. It really transformed memory into a highly subjective act of engaging with digital technologies where images play a major role, or are actually the primary medium here, with a lot of interaction and reinterpretation, of course. The key tensions, just quickly, we see a lot of memory diversification. I think a lot of what we see here comes hand in hand with the theory of Michael Rothberg of multidirectional memories. So we see while the memorial landscape diversifies the narratives, or we see a very different area of interpretations here. This also creates, on the one hand, it creates connections, but on the other hand, it also creates the potential for competition and dilution. And I think this is where we see very nicely how the theories coincide also with the digital, what's going on in the digital world. The other two, of course, would be Global Digital Memory by Anna Redding and Connective Memory by Andrew Hoskins, that I think are also very important theoretical concepts here. So what we have in this phase, a lot of talk about risks. What are the risks? Especially here we talk about the social media platforms, and here the words that come up are oversimplification, trivialization, inappropriateness, that are the most used ones. And I think it becomes quite clear that social media present a persistent challenge, especially if we talk about a nuanced understanding or an integrative understanding of Holocaust history and memory. And I also think the battle against misinformation has not become easier. On the contrary, it's become much more important ever since then, and it continues to be central to our field. What we also see here in this phase, we see an alarming viralization, Holocaust denial, distortion, anti-Semitism, hate speech explode in many of the new spaces that are created. And since this happens, the content moderation is a struggle, and platforms have a hard time if to engage with that, or if to allow what is under the term freedom of speech to just roam freely. The current reality, I think we're all aware of what is happening there. Platforms no longer effectively moderate or are willing to moderate the discussion. So we move to the final phase in my talk. I hope you're not asleep yet, at least not all of you. And I decided to do this in a special phase because, first of all, it's out of my book, or more or less out of my book, but I also think we really have some very distinct developments that we should trace here. So the last period was profoundly shaped, I think, by unprecedented global events, the pandemic, and also at the same time with the relentless march of technological innovation that we see here. If I were to make a timeline, and that's what I actually thought about doing of the projects that I've been tracing in my book, but also what is happening here and who is present here, I think the end of phase 3 and especially phase 4 would be very crowded with all of you. So please don't be disappointed if I don't have you on my slides. I'm pretty sure that you are very present at least here in Brighton. So we moved to the last phase, the pandemic and the digital wilds, as I called it. COVID-19 forced a very rapid and quick shift to fully digital Holocaust remembrance. The traditional ceremonies became entirely virtual and globally accessible online. I actually made a study for another paper that I did on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz on the 27th of January in 2020. As you know, this was already a point when the world started talking about a pandemic, and this was the last thing. I think this was the last hybrid event. After that, for the rest of the year, most of the commemorations were fully virtual. So this also had as a result, it accelerated the digital trends that were there before, and it forced institutions and memorials to innovate online. So also this entire digital world became the primary mode of communication and of commemoration, I think. Institutions created online exhibitions, virtual tours, webinars, live streams. The core work was basically moved to cyberspace. So the fluid memory online that we see becomes the new normal, or became the new normal. As we know, some of this has gone back to the static landscape. And I think the words that I found most in the theoretical literature or in the historical literature about this is that memory became a malleable digital memory landscape at this point. So the pandemic's impact on the one hand was that transitional reach of Holocaust memory was amplified to a global participation and access, of course. On the other hand, it fragmented very rapidly, the entire space fragmented. Memory was consumed through personal devices or by algorithms became very individualized. Reinforcing filter bubbles and isolating users within specific narratives. This is why I also said before, I think globital memory, this idea of the Holocaust becoming this great moral value of the world, this solidified somehow, but also it showed how susceptible this idea became as this Western concept of the Holocaust being this highest standard, how susceptible it was to attack. We see, I don't think I need to go into details here, we see counter memories and alternative histories thrive at this, in this last phase. Web 2.0 really empowered individuals. And we see a lot of projects that now, or initiatives that now challenge established narratives, and they all offer alternative perspectives. So we have a lot of very interesting projects coming up here, but in this really noisy digital landscape, I think that we had, or we still have, some initiatives really face digital marginalization, and their nuanced contributions, they really get drowned out by a more sensational content. At the same time, the pandemic saw also the surge of some very sophisticated data aggregation projects. Just to mention one here, as the Jewish Museum Berlin's Jewish Places initiatives, if I'm still able to talk, which leveraged a lot of aggregated archival data with user contributions. I think it's grown into this really nice space to visualize Jewish life in Germany. Similarly, I think we also saw the rise and success of some very great crowdsourcing or crowd correcting projects in this area. Just to mention one, every name counts from the Artisan archives. In stark contrast, we have yet another social media platform that now rises to the fore with even faster paced, even shorter messages. TikTok, that's why I also called it one of the milestones. I think the project of Lily Ebert and Duff Foreman were a very big inroad into this platform. But we have also other projects, and I know some of you are presenting them here today. Other digital things now are being seriously considered. Also, this we've heard before. Serious games, or I've learned it's not called a serious games. I apologize. Games are now being explored, not through the darkest of times, but we have seen the children of Bullenhuser today, and many or several others. Although I must say my academically sophisticated choices never actually allowed me to survive through the darkest of times, so I, for some reason, was not able to survive. But so this is a very a younger phase where we really cross other lines that were supposed not to be crossed so far. And some of the examples also include non-institutional user-created content, for example, in Minecraft, in open world games, where this community has been recreating Auschwitz-Birkenau meticulously with the cubes. For those of you who play Minecraft, they know better than I do. Creating digital memorials, both in the summer, in the winter, in the fall. So also really creating new worlds over there. While many of these initiatives are intended for a younger generation, again, we have this buzzword again. They, of course, also face a lot of challenges in the digital world. Yes, I'm coming to an end almost. But I really have to bring this across to you because I've been tracing the discourses over and over again. And I think this next step really made me take a deep breath for a second. So we see the non-fungible token industry, so to say, the NFTs and blockchain, to really make their inroads also to the Holocaust history and the Holocaust memory, with symbolic commodification and commercialization of a very sensitive history, I think. NFT projects, so NFTs are driven by speculative economic interests. I think they really raise ethical concerns that I feel a little bit uncomfortable about, because it is about privatization and monetization. And they raise all the challenges we've had so far to a new level. It's not just about selling objects, but it's about transforming, I think, the symbols, stories, and experiences associated with Holocaust history and memory into marketable items. So the symbols that we have of the Holocaust, they carry, I think, a lot of emotional weight and a lot of cultural responsibility. And now they are detached from that, and they are repurposed for commercial gain. In the literature that I found, we find critical issues like trivialization, delusion, exploitation of trauma, and so on. But what I think is really one of the big questions is the ethical concern about ownership. Who owns the memory and symbols of collective trauma? When these are commodified by private people or by individuals or also by institutions, it raises the questions: who benefits? Is this a private good, or is it a public good in the end? Examples: Claude Lanzmann's Spectres of the Shoah NFT by Adam Benstein in 2021. The documentary, we all know of that. Adam Benstein tried to sell the film, so to say, as an NFT. And it didn't sell in the end, I have to say that. But of course, it has had this outcry also, especially in journalistic papers, to say, should such content actually even be treated as an asset for profit? We have other examples, like the one that I brought here from Kasdei Naomi. She did a charitable NFT of survivor memories. So basically, she is trying to do this artwork or charitable artwork to fundraise, to get some money. But also here, I would have to ask, is this tokenization and commercialization of trauma, does it belong to this world? And so far, until I found this, I thought, yeah, okay, at some point we will get to that we will accept this is what's happening. But then I found a text of Yehada Jabotinsky and Ohad Dan. The text is NFT for Eternity, it's called, and they were talking about what if somebody is using NFTs for harmful speech. So what if somebody were to mint hate speech or Holocaust denial? as immutable NFTs on a blockchain. This would actually create a permanent, unremovable digital record of harmful content. So, without going into the key tensions, let me just finish quickly, because Victoria is kicking me out of here. I'm not going into the 4 phases. We have seen them. I'll just describe them with one word. I think the first phase would be the phase of preservation, the second, the one of exploration, the third, the one of participation, and the last one of fragmentation. I'm not going into all of this, but I'm going to really finish here. Over the past years, with all the events going on globally, I've many times asked myself, have we failed with all we are doing? And I think many of you are probably asked this question again. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you, because I might be tempted to say yes. But then I thought, no, actually, what is more important, what can we do? And I think we can safeguard the Holocaust memory in the digital age. That's our job. And for that, I would use 5 strategies, which I'm not allowed to elaborate on now. But just quickly, educate, so foster critical digital literacy. And I'm just putting in here, why do we always focus on younger generations, whoever that is? Why not on older generations, since we know here we have a problem and how to deal with digital technology. Elevate, so I would insist on historical depth and deeper context, but why do we not use technology to force that onto short messages? Question. I think we have to enforce, so we still have to push for ethical platforms. I know this sounds like an illusionment at this point, but I think we just have to continue doing that. I think we have to engage, meaning we have to embrace this digital environment. I think there is a great potential here, and I think we have to use the power of the digital world quite proactively and quite aggressively. And whatever is happening here, we've seen a lot of communities growing here, but I'm still waiting for the project that tries to the initiative that tries to influence the influences of this world. And finally, to endure, and this is really my last word, Victoria. This is a long-term struggle. Memory is a long-term struggle. Preserving the history and integrity of the Holocaust memory and history is a long-term struggle. So we can just continue what we are doing. We need to collaborate. I think this is quite clear. This is an interdisciplinary field. It becomes more and more interdisciplinary as we are going on. So we can just continue in this way. We have to innovate continuously, and I think we just should never lose the focus on our core mission, which should remain never again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ava. It's really nostalgic in parts, I think, some of those conversations we were having like 2012 about these radically new things and how things have changed so quickly since then. I'm not going to be selfish and take the fact I'm near a microphone to ask Ava the million questions I would ask her. We have microphones floating around the room, so if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. We have about 20 minutes for questions. Can we get a microphone? Oh, we have, it's being live streamed as well, so we need you on mic, I'm afraid.
Two microphones.
So yeah, first of all, thank you for the keynote. You relied heavily on the Wayback Machine, and I assume that many of these pages are no longer online at all. So my first question is there any effort done to archive these archives in a decentralized manner? Because, I mean, the Wayback Machine itself is quite precarious.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I started my project in 2012 and really didn't have anything else. I really didn't have any other archives, but you're absolutely right. I cannot tell you how many times I've really stumbled upon not being able to download, because I really downloaded the 120 websites and other 60 projects that I was trying to trace. And in 2014, when I started downloading, this was an overnight job, at least, or a weekend job, just to download all the websites or the screenshots from USHMM. So I have an archive on a hard disk. I don't think this is an alternative, but you're absolutely right. I would call for very decentralized archiving, not only of the website, but also of your archival collections, especially now since everything is so much in danger. Yeah. But thanks, take the initiative, do it.
It's interesting you talk about this decentralization, actually, because there's a kind of, we're on the cusp of Web 3.0, right? Which is and the push of that is around decentralization, and there are some ethical questions on either side about whether this is a good way of decentralization or not. Well, I'm picking up all the minds, don't I? And it would be interesting in a couple of years to see, have this, the next stage, the decentralized, the Web 3.3, have things changed? Are we in a more optimistic place or more problematic place?
Yeah, I must say also some of these initiatives, especially the private ones, I always save them on the Wayback Machine when I saw them, at least to have one space where they are. But of course, if you're the one driving that web, you could also have it deleted. So, I mean, of course. But yeah, that's interesting.
Sorry, we need 2 mics because we can't interfere with this system for the live stream. So I'm afraid you have to have 2.
Okay. Thank you, Eva, for your fascinating presentation. It was really, really important to have this, to draft all the state of the art in the area, because sometimes we miss pieces, and you did a great job in providing this overview. I have 2 questions. The first one is, have you seen any significant changes since October the 7th in the field? In terms not specifically about the interest of the topic, but how our projects or initiatives have slightly refocused or changed. And the second question is, you know that my background is educational science. So what I'm trying to do is to understand, to investigate, and to foster Holocaust education by using digital technology. And unfortunately, what we are seeing is that Holocaust educators are still very much resistant against, they are prone to go to the online archives, websites, but not when it comes to social media or to games or to artificial intelligence or virtual reality or augmented reality. So I'm asking to an historian, do you have any specific recommendations for us, for me as an education science scholar, how to foster, to encourage Holocaust educators to also, actually it's not just single people, but also organizations focused on Holocaust education, which still are very resistant against it. So my question is if you have a specific recommendation or piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefania, for these really important questions, of course. October 7th, let me start with the first one. I've been actually trying to look at Wikipedia again, because that would mean my space where I expected a lot of things to happen, and I've been monitoring the Holocaust lemmas in German, Italian, English, yeah, more or less, and also discussions. And interestingly enough, not really a lot happened there. Which also could now be a very interesting discussion. So why not? Is Wikipedia no longer this discursive space, or where the moderators of these specific, as we've seen, the most challenged, or some among the most challenged articles, have they been so strong? But we have not seen a lot of increase in traffic there. So that's the one answer I can give you there. I have not been doing a lot of work on the other things, because I'm focusing on other things right now. But yes, it would be interesting to see how the message, oh no, that's not actually true. I actually traced the Anne Frank house on the Wayback Machine also to see how that changed. And I think we all know what the message right now is, and that is we really don't know how to respond to that, I think. So, but yeah, it would be interesting to make a deeper study on this, and maybe if I were to do this study again, I would just use totally different technology right now. I didn't have these things back then, but now, of course, I would aggregate the data differently and maybe use other spaces. But it would be interesting to do that. Second question, education. Stefania, if I would have an answer to that, I would probably tour from one educational institution to the other. I think you've done a great job at trying to find what is an appropriate social media response and how can we have educators to pick this up and do this. I think there is one initiative that works, interestingly enough, quite well. That's the Austrian Ɂattened. That's a very low-level community funded by the Ministry of Interior, Education, I think. And it actually always brings together, it's been bringing together teachers for 10 years now. And they meet online for many things, and they do online projects together. And they just, like 2 weeks ago, they had this meeting where I was invited, and they wanted to do something on social media. And we looked at your material, of course, and other things that we saw on TikTok, and so on and so forth. But you can see them, they are hesitant because in Austria at least, and I don't know how this is in Italy, or we talked about this briefly, in Austria at least now the teachers really face pushback from students in their classrooms. And so they not only have a hard time teaching Holocaust history or memory at all, using these technologies that they don't appropriate, they don't own, they clearly say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so I think that's what I mean with my first E here, educate. This is where we have to push into just more and more technology, make it easier accessible, try to get rid of those barriers that have people not using discursive spaces, saying, well, I don't know, you tell me, let's talk about this. But it's very difficult to stand in the classroom and have people pushing back at you in a very mean manner also at some point. So unfortunately, I don't have answers to that question.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation, and you know, it's a history of the internet as well as a history of this memory project. And I was wondering, what do you think the next phase might look like? Because I'm curious whether you think that calls for regulation to kind of contain the internet are possibly the future, and if so, can academics and memory organizations, you know, leaders in the field, can they play a role in calling for this kind of control? Or do you think that the genie's out of the bottle and there's no way to try and get it back in?
Oh, very tricky question, because I could bring myself into trouble with this, but thank you for this very important question. I don't really know. I don't think, I don't hope we are going to over-regulate the internet. I think with social media, we also could see this 3.0 emerging, that we need decentralized social media networks. I think that could be a solution. I'm not sure if we can get there. We could try. I think the next step basically is really that. I mean, I started that. I'm very much doing a lot of work with AI right now, and I was very interested in seeing the projects in the EXPO space up there. And even looking at that, I thought, well, I wouldn't put the question like that. In using AI, I would actually really, do I dare to say this, but we have so great materials here. We have so many digital materials. Why do we not create an AI language out of that we can then use for maybe a next step in education? Because now we are using today's AI languages to project that back to the history, and then we use those today's language for something that happened a long time ago. And I think this would be a really interesting idea to, can we, from all the material that we have, can we create the language of the Holocaust era, or of this time period, and maybe then get a deeper understanding, and maybe then also influence how AI talks about these things. So I think decentralization is going to be also very important for all the archival efforts, but also I think we really have to engage with these AIs because I think they can be very helpful. Like I said, deeper understanding. We have the narratives. Use AI to create, I don't know, knowledge graphs of knowledge graphs, to use this material. The very fragmented narratives link to our archives, link to your archives, to your narratives. So I still hope, I'm still very hopeful that we have a very, critically young generation who wants to engage with this in a very open manner, but also very sensitive of the difficulty of our history, of the counter history that's coming up here. But I cannot give you the answer to what is happening next. Unfortunately, so far I was always pushing to let's centralize success, and now we are all, no, we can't do that. This is really difficult.
I want to just come back to something you mentioned earlier about this kind of, it's a long game, right? To keep memory, it has to be a long game, otherwise it's not memory, it's just I remembered yesterday, and then it's gone. But you mentioned with ₹ government funding at some level, and here we're talking about regulation, which is always a government level, and governments don't do long term. They do short term, and also when the more we get to this international collectivity, one government change affects that. So the international connections are never stable because all these governments are constantly changing. We're seeing, certainly in the last 5-6 years, huge waves of changes, and then back and forth, and it feels like that's one of these barriers, which perhaps is the call for decentralization, right? That we can't trust in the governing powers of centralization.
Yeah, maybe that's the next barrier that breaks up the transnational thing. It sounds, but maybe that's where we're going. I hope not.
We had a couple more questions. I think there was one at the back-ish.
Thank you. I thought this was really a fascinating talk, and I think for those of us who've been looking at the material for quite some time, it's also been a walk down the memory lane to see the old Use HMM page, the old Yad Vashem page with act and reflection being, I think for those of us who've been doing this a bit longer, this has been really also fascinating looking at the last 15 to 20 years in working with the material. So I really liked your presentation. I do have 2 questions that I'd like to pose at this moment. You spoke about the early signals of destabilization, and you already mentioned them in the very first stages that you pointed out. And I was wondering, up until or after the Arab Spring, we assumed the internet to be a quite hopeful technology in the broader discourse, and the rifts came in quite late. So is that perspective that you've been taking, and I think it's a really important point that you're raising, is that one of the historian looking retrospectively, or do we have discourse notions at that moment that were not really considered? So that would be my first question. And the second one, you know my realm of research. I was wondering about audiovisual material. Where does it come in? Because you've been saying from 2007 onwards, images, the visual becomes much, much more important. But I was thinking that latest 2014, 2015, that it's no longer memes, that it's no longer low resolution images, but we get into a lot of data traffic, and we get into films and clips. So I wondered if you could say a couple words on that.
Okay, maybe let me thank you, Alina, for these really important questions, of course. Maybe let me start with the second one. You're absolutely right. A lot of the images that we see coming in, or that we start to dominate the discourse in this third phase, so to say, they come from the institutions of memory. So also films, also short films, they come from that. So they're being reimagined, reframed, reconnected. It's not that there are new images coming up or new visuals coming up. Maybe I should have used more visuals than images. But through the multiplication, so to say, also this, we have a lot of creation of images, recreation of images, but they really do come from the sources that are available online, if that answers your question correctly. Yeah. So no, you saw that. And the first question, the Arab Spring, of course. You don't know how many times I ask myself why that actually failed. And I've been working in another project where we've been trying to compare the 1970s movements, social movements, with the movements around 2011. Unfortunately, we didn't get the funding. There we go again. But it would have been interesting because we tried to find the archives of the social movements in the 1970s, which is not easy, believe me, not digital archives. I'm just talking about archival material. And we had the collection of the social media, some of the social media campaigns. So there is an idea for some of you. Go ahead, do this project. It would be really interesting. And I don't have an answer for you, but I have maybe a suspicion. And that is that counter-narratives very quickly met online, networked online, and created big spaces of counter-narratives. But it's more an intuition. We would have to ask Mikola to trace that story, probably. I don't have that money, Mikola. You have to work at night, sorry. But it would be really interesting to trace this more. You're absolutely right, yeah.
We have time probably for one more question, if anyone has one.
Thank you. So, thank you for the talk. And it was really nice to see all the phases and the logic and the system. But what I am really interested in is your visions. You kind of keep it back a bit, but now it's coming out after the questions. And I found it very interesting what you said, that there could be a chance to create the digital language of the Holocaust era. And I want to say that the writers in literature who write about the Holocaust, and among them migrates, Hungarian Nobel Prize winner, writing about the Holocaust, he said that we cannot spare the pain. Mm-hmm. He even said, I want to hurt my readers. So there is a question about the human emotion, the trauma, the intergenerational trauma. So how do you place that in this world where AI-ruled languages are created, different social media sites are created, we can put in the logic and everything, but what do we do in this new language about the human suffering in the digital age?
Oh my God, Anna, that's your expertise. That's why I'm saying maybe we need to use the material we have. Of course, as soon as you mention an author, I'm just, oh my God, this is never going to enter any AI space because of copyright and I don't know. Yeah. Right now, AI is, you all know the phase when it was so proactive, so supportive that you really got sick of AI at some point. Right now it's very flat, it's very supportive if you want to, it's not too negative, it answers you, I can't do that, this is too negative or something like that. But it also shows this is, we perceive AI not as this big bag of words, not yet, as this big bag of words that's just constructing the next word out of quantitative analysis. So how we could use this technology that is created on the words to create empathy and deal with trauma. I don't have, no, I'm sorry, also here, I don't have an answer for you. I wish I had, but I think yeah, that would be something that you could probably contribute to this space, which I think is really important. And you have been investigating Facebook sites, for example, from this perspective, and it would be interesting to maybe go deeper into this and aggregating more data and trying to find how does this work. But we would need a lot of data. Yeah.
We are about to wrap up. I just add one note on that Todd President's most recent book, The Ethics of the Algorithm. He traces back the quantitative and the proto-computational to Boda's work, and that he kind of quantifies trauma. So the idea of, I find that really complicated and difficult, but this concept that trauma could in any way be quantified was there at the beginning, in the immediate kind of post-Holocaust moment, and we've somehow kind of, so his book's talking about how we're sometimes going back to that, but the definition of trauma and how we distinguish what we call trauma is like it's changed, and therefore we can't quantify this more messy affective memory idea of trauma. But he was talking about trauma as events that were traumatic as an event, and that's much easier to quantify. And so these our definitions are changing as well with technologies and
also memory. What's memory in an AI space?
We'll leave it with that big question.
Yeah.
Can we please thank Ada for